One city council member says the council will work to lay out how the city-owned French Quarter apartment Mayor Cantrell spent long hours in can be used.
It comes after the New Orleans Office of Inspector General concluded Mayor Cantrell's use of the apartment could violate city ordinance and state law.
Here's our new Outside the Office investigation.
The opinion that has been rendered by the Inspector General is in some respects overdue, but long overdue, and it may have been overdue.
Overdue. That's how Councilman Eugene Green describes plans to finally put something in writing, laying out how the city-owned Upper Pontalba Apartment should be used.
I don't want to make a specific suggestion because then I would be going beyond the discourse that needs to happen in that regard, but the City Council will certainly take up the matter with a committee that is going to investigate all possible uses. But we want it to be to the highest and best use for the taxpayers of the city of New Orleans.
It comes after the New Orleans Inspector General recommended the apartment should no longer be reserved for the sitting mayor and should be put back into commerce.
One of our findings with this letter is because of an undocumented agreement between a French Market Corporation and the city, this apartment remains vacant at all times for events sponsored by the mayor. Personal use of this apartment by the mayor gives the appearance of a donation of public property, which is in violation of the Louisiana Constitution.
The OIG launched its investigation after a series of Fox 8 investigations that found Mayor Cantrell spending long hours at the apartment, both during the workday and outside of work hours. The OIG concluded Cantrell's personal use of the apartment likely violated city ordinance and likely state law.
So in addition to the mayor's daily use of the apartment to include working late and early morning hours, members of the mayor's family also utilized the apartment, which would indicate a personal use.
Inspector General Ed Michel first sent a letter to the French Market Corporation urging them to stop allowing Cantrell and any future mayors from using the apartment.
Well, this is problematic for several reasons. One of the most important ones, as you know, we're responsible for ensuring that the government uses the very limited resources the city has in a very efficient and effective manner. This apartment can be rented for $2,900 a month, which could generate about $36,000 a year for the city. The city also pays an additional $5,000 a year in utilities, which brings the total of about $41,000 that the city is not collecting every year while this apartment remains open and vacant and available to the mayor for her use.
However, the French Market Corporation says it only manages the apartment and is not authorized to make rules as to its use.
Unfortunately, both the FMC staff and the OIG's research of the historical records, including those in the city archives from mayors as far back as 1930, found no written agreements or policies regarding the use of the mayor's apartment. The city, as the property owner, retained control of the mayor's apartment as early as 1988. And removed the unit from possession and control of the managing entity at that time. That managing entity predated the French Market Corporation. Thus, the French Market Corporation has never had possession or control of that unit. Further, it's not for the manager of the remaining property to set the terms of use of the unit by the owner.
Michel then sent a letter to the council urging the city to relinquish the mayor's apartment to the French Market Corporation to rent to the public. Councilman Green stopped short of making that commitment, but says it is a priority to determine in writing how the apartment should be used.
I think that the word that you use that's most important is recommendation, and we will take that recommendation into account. We recognize that the city needs to take advantage of every resource that we can. There could be potential uses that could be of benefit to the taxpayers.
The OIG also sent its recommendation to Mayor Cantrell's office earlier this month. We reached out to the mayor's office for comment at that time, but no one responded.